When we arrived home, my mother admired the cleanliness and delicious dinner, but then, after a couple of days, when she rested and slept off the jet lag, I began to notice that she was different. Hello everyone, my name is Julie, and I have a mother who will beat anyone's. And all because she is 18 years old. Well, at least she thinks so. Do you want to know how it happened and what the pros and cons are? Then watch, and do not forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and I am also waiting for comments from you. Write your opinion under the video. I will appreciate it. In general, I lived with mom and dad for a long time, but then a difficult financial period came into our life, and this was due to our family's debts. Dad decided to open some business, and as you know, any business requires a lot of investment. Due to the fact that we did not calculate the capital, we had to get into debt. And when our family crossed the line of real opportunities, it was decided to earn money not here, but abroad. Dad couldn't give up what he was doing, so we stayed at home. And Mom left. Of course, I didn't want to let her go, and besides, I'm very attached to her. But there was no other way. So she collected the documents, got a visa, and left. I cannot tell you how hard it was for me to live just with my father, because my mother used to run the farm, and after her departure, everything fell on my shoulders. I was almost 15 years old at the time. I didn't really know how to cook, wash, or clean, but I had to learn quickly, so I pulled myself together and started everything from scratch on my own. My mother found a good job, and within 2 years, we were able to spread out debts, as well as level the business, plus we saved up for our house, car, and things went well. That's when my father told my mother to come home. At first, my mother did not hide her longing for me. She cried every time we talked on the phone, but then her calls became less frequent. It upset me because I wanted her attention, but she wasn't there. My father was almost always busy at work, so I was on my own. After school, I came home and did household chores. I didn't have time to go out with friends. The only consolation was the books. I slipped a little in my studies, but it was not critical. The teachers at the school knew about my situation and were more lenient with me. Through persuasion, my mother still came. It was an exciting day. We went to the airport to meet my mother. My father bought a large bouquet of her favorite flowers, and I cooked a turkey in the oven. But already at the airport, I noticed that my mother was not the same person. The woman standing in front of us with a suitcase was not the woman we knew. Previously, my mother dressed more appropriately for her age. She was already 44 years old, but there she stood in short white shorts, a pink t-shirt with the inscription, "I am a princess," and she was wearing a cap and large glasses. I was surprised, but my dad and I decided it was just clothes, nothing more. We were wrong. All the way home, my mother talked about the city where she worked, about its beauty and the people. My father and I couldn't even get a word in. When we arrived home, my mother admired the cleanliness and delicious dinner, but then, after a couple of days, when she rested and slept off the jet lag, I began to notice that she was different. First thing in the morning, my mother did not make breakfast, as before. She ran to the bathroom and put on makeup. It was not clear why. After that, she put on her sundresses, youth overalls, did her hair, and only then went to breakfast. By the way, yes, I continued to cook. My father would quickly leave for work, and it would just be the two of us. When I came home from school, she was talking on the phone. The house was not cleaned, and there was nothing cooked. I changed my clothes and made lunch, and after I did my homework, made dinner. I tried to justify my mother by saying that she was tired, or had not yet adapted, but it was not so. My mother often went out, made connections with former unmarried friends. She came home late and sometimes drunk. There was another teenager in the house. In short, every time my friends came to see me, my mother sat in our room all evening and talked to us. They didn't even pay attention to me. They chatted with her all the time. My mom kept asking them about guys, giving them seduction tips, and laughing. I was envied by all my classmates. Like, my mom is so modern, but it wasn't very cool. Then one day, I met a guy named Dave. He was wonderful and asked me out right away and came home to pick me up. My mother opened the door. She didn't know who he was, and I noticed that she was trying to flirt with him. Dave almost fell through the ground from embarrassment. She could not see herself from the outside. I quickly left with him, and he asked, "Is that your sister?" I was never so embarrassed. I told the truth, and he said enthusiastically that it was cool when my mother was like me. I came home from the date and found my mother singing karaoke to the whole house. She put the music on at full volume, danced, freaked out, smoked. I never saw her smoke. When she saw me, she didn't hide, but offered me cigarettes and handed me a glass of red liquid. "Let's party," she shouted. It was terrible. She went shopping almost every day, sometimes dragging me along with her. She chose the same things for me as for herself. How can you do that? She was my mother. People around me were surprised when I called her Mom, and I felt ashamed. In the end, even my father noticed this, and he made a remark to her to pull herself together, start doing things around the house. Then in response, she locked herself in the bathroom, shouted from there that we do not love her, and cried loudly. And then I got out of there, packed up, and went somewhere else. That night, Dad got a call from the station. It turned out that she got drunk at the club, broke a window there, got into a fight with some girl, and got rowdy at the station. Rumors spread all over the city. The uncontrollable teenager in the face of my mother went off the rails. It was necessary to do something, and we decided to take her to a psychologist. She resisted for a long time, resented us, but eventually went anyway. The psychologist said that my mother is now going through a teenage life in her head because in her childhood, she did not experience this period. She really did have a difficult childhood. She lost her mother early and had to work from the age of 15. And at the moment when everything got better in life, money appeared and my father and I were not around, she turned back into a teenager. It can be cured, but it takes time. We made her promise to visit a specialist. In the meantime, I still put up with an 18-year-old mother who steals my makeup. This is simply unthinkable. Tell me, guys, are we doing everything right? And what would you advise us to do?
Sup, my name is Alex. Tell me, guys, many of you probably want to quickly become adults and independent, right? It's so cool to make your own decisions, to live the way you want, and in general, not to ask anyone's permission, including your parents. So I recently went through a similar thing. Yes, my mother decided to give me the green light for everything. We had an agreement, and now I want to tell you about my experience and what I went through. In general, listen. I have both a father and mother. I was born a late child in the family. My parents couldn't get pregnant for years, and that's probably why when I was born, my mother was especially protective of me. From the first moment she took me in her arms, she never let me go, so my father said. My mother wouldn't let anyone hold me, didn't show me to any of her friends for the first 6 months, and I don't think even the neighbors really knew she'd given birth. My mother was too careful, but it made her feel better. It was her love. My father had assumed that all this was temporary, that as soon as I grew up, my mother would be more relaxed about everything, but he was wrong. You know, the older I got, the more problems my mother had. For example, every time I went to the kitchen to turn on the kettle to drink tea or cocoa, my mother would run in at the speed of light and take any equipment out of my hands. She thought that I could get burned, hurt, or even die, and preferred to do it herself. But that's half the trouble. I still have a radio nanny in my bedroom, so you understand, I'm already 16 years old. My mother is calmer when she hears me snoring, and if I turn off the radio, she runs to my room and listens to me breathe, and in the morning I'm in trouble. Until recently, my mother did not let me go for a walk with friends, and if she let me go, then I had to return home no later than 2000. All my friends already mocked me, but if I was late for at least 15 minutes, my mother began to get hysterical. She immediately put pressure on pity, her advanced age, and on the fact that she has a weak heart. I was getting tired of it. I wondered why I was paying the price for being born so late. I'm not allowed to breathe freely at all. My every step is monitored, and my mother's overprotection is seen by everyone except herself. And one day, I rebelled. It happened at one of the parties. My classmate Spence invited me to his house. He promised me to introduce me to a girl that I have long liked. Her name was Nellie. Of course, my mom again only let me go until 2000 hours, whereas the party started at 1900 hours. I wanted to argue with her, but then I thought, I will not spoil the mood. Just do everything quietly, silently, and in fact, I will sort it out at home. I packed up and went to a party just before the weekend. I'm in a great mood, There were a lot of people at the party, well, including Nellie. Spence introduced us, as promised, and the time flew by so fast that I didn't notice it was already 20:30. Nellie and I went out on the balcony, drinking juice and chatting about something. All of a sudden, my phone was just tearing apart, and I could see my mom calling. I didn't want to embarrass myself in front of the girl, and I stupidly dumped. Finally, when my mom called me 23 times, Nellie asked if she was a girl who was hitting on me. I said, No, that's it. The house is ringing. Apparently they want something. I'll call you back later, I said, and turned off the phone. Nellie and I chatted and paid no attention to anyone. Then we got hungry and decided to go downstairs. I took her hand and we went down the stairs. Nellie was just an unreal girl. I've been wanting to meet her for so long. Alex, why did you turn off the phone? A voice that was painfully familiar to me. It sounded all over the house. I looked up and saw my mother looking furious. She was standing in the middle of a house in slippers and homely clothes, her hands folded on her hips and glaring at me. I immediately ran to her. I wanted to take her as far as possible, but she continued to yell. She was furious. You're being punished. There will be no internet for a week, no pocket money for you, and just try to turn off the radio nanny now, she shouted. At that moment, my world collapsed. When everyone heard about the radio nanny, the whole house exploded with laughter. Everyone looked at me and laughed, and I wanted to sink into the ground. I grabbed my mother's hand, and without even saying goodbye to anyone, I drove home. I didn't talk to her all the way, and when we got home I told her what I was thinking. I shouted that she had shamed me in front of the guys, especially the girl, that I was tired of her tutelage and control, that I wanted freedom, to which my mother told me that I was not independent at all. You're giving me opportunities to become one. How old am I now? And you're acting like I'm 2 years old. My father intervened, trying to calm us all down, and then said we were both going too far. He talked to my mother that I was right about something, and then asked me not to raise my voice to my mother anymore. My mother was very unhappy, and then said that she gives me 1 month without any restrictions on anything. We agreed, and from the very next day, I began to live a different life. I cleaned up the radio nanny, made my own breakfast. It was such bliss. I packed my own bag for school and decided with my friends on my weekend plans. Every day was precious. I was just happy to be free. I worked at school from morning till lunch, and then went for a walk with Nellie. By the way, she reacted with understanding to the situation, said that she has a strict father, so she understands me. We started dating. I came home late. At first it seemed to me, it's a buzz, but after a week I almost didn't get enough sleep. My mother didn't really talk to me, so as not to annoy herself once again, so I didn't climb. Then I went back to the party. To be honest, I was a little freaked out by the freedom. For the weekend, I went back to the party, as I said, so that's where I tried alcohol for the first time. I was so carried away that I didn't even notice. I didn't understand what was wrong with me. Nellie tried to stop me, but I didn't listen to her. I drank more, and then decided to try to smoke, which made me feel even worse. At some point, I think I passed out, came to myself in the morning. I didn't remember where I was or with whom. The house was unfamiliar to me. It was dirty and uncomfortable. I looked in the refrigerator for a drink, drank some juice, took a shower, and then went to look for a house. In the yard I met someone. It was probably the owner of the house. He shook my hand and called me crazy and offered to continue. I am without hesitation, agreed, and we drank again. In the afternoon we wanted to eat, but there was no food, as well as money. We went with him to the market drunk, took food without asking, and began to eat. The owner of the store chased us. We began to run away. He called the police. That guy easily dodged the cops when they arrived. They almost grabbed him, but he set me up. Yes, he pushed me towards them and then ran away. I only sobered up at the station. I was terribly ashamed in front of my father when he came to pull me out. It turns out that I was not at home for 3 days, and I did not even remember where I was and with whom. Dad pulled me out, and I came home all swollen, dirty, and smelly. My mother didn't ask a word. After I took a shower, I went over to her and apologized. "Son, are you in trouble?" asked the mother. I lied to her, told her everything was fine, and then my mother said something I didn't expect to hear. "I'm sorry, it's my fault. If I hadn't held you back so much, if I hadn't banned everything, you wouldn't have gone to the police. I wouldn't drink myself into oblivion. Everything should have its time, she said. These words sounded sincere. I did not expect to hear this, but suddenly I realized that I was also stupid and screwed up. I asked her for forgiveness, and we agreed to respect each other's boundaries, to be close, but to get into each other's lives by force. My father said it was the right thing to do. Well, what do you guys think? My mother and I have kept our word ever since. I didn't drink or smoke anymore, but my mom trusted me more and threw out the radio nanny.